Hey guys, thanks. Welcome. Thanks for coming out. You know, it would seem like a really likely way for Ciscoe and I to meet through gardening, but we didn't. We met. I listened to his show. I watched him on TV for 6 years, 7, 10, 15, whatever. And I actually met him last year with Greg Butler, who works with the Highline Botanical Garden. He works with the Highline Botanical Garden. I've been doing donations every year at the Highline Botanical Garden for their fundraisers, and I had never met Ciscoe. So one day Greg called me and said, I got to bring a surprise over to you. And this was last July?
Yeah, I think
it was last July. And I thought he was bringing me a plant. But he wasn't bringing me a plant. He brought me a comedian.
A contorted comedian.
Yeah. And so we, you know, of course I was surprised and very grateful. And we walked around the garden and I showed him my Lobelia Victoria. And I hooked him up, you know. That's how I got Ciscoe. So, because he loves that plant. So, anyway, I was going through. Maybe a lot of you know, I was going through the foreclosure, the fight with Bank of America, and Ciscoe was very publicly supportive of me on his radio show, and also announced me at the Highland Botanical Garden, just in support of, patronize your small businesses. We're losing nurseries rapidly. And then there's the homeowners losing their homes, and they lose their homes, and then they're not gardening, and gardening is a sanctuary, which is, a very spiritual, personal experience for me. And so he was just very, very supportive. So we came together because of my fight with Bank of America, but we have a lot in common. So he's funnier than me, though. So anyway, I would like to thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and he's gonna, quiz you guys and find out where you're at with your plant knowledge, and then share a lot of it with you. So there's some free T-shirts for some of the questions.
Yeah. All right. Well, oh la la! It's great to be here. Now, in a minute, I'm going to tell you a story. Before I do, though, I do want to show you a few things that I'm going to give away myself, too. So somebody's going to win my book. And it's called Ask Ciscoe, and it was the #1 selling garden book in the United States for a while, so that was pretty cool for me. 15 minutes at bedtime cures all insomnia. Okay, so somebody will win this. Of course, I'll sign it. I got to find the right one. Oops, I got the wrong one, of course. This always happens. So, now, before I even show these, oh man, which one is it? My wife gets really mad at me if I show the wrong one because she folds them all up. But I can't find it, so I'm going to have to open one. All right, one last try here. Ah, good. So, these were designed by my wife, Mary. And they are, I only give one away at every talk. I never sell them, okay? So, because I always have 100 people come up, I'll give you $50 for one. So, I got it with Ciscoe t-shirt, even oh la la. So, one person's going to win one. I gave a talk at an old age home, and all the old people stole all my t-shirts. And then we got these great Village Green t-shirts, and now I don't know what size these are going to be. So on mine, you get to rummage through and find your size. I got one of every size. But I'll be throwing these at people, and if it's not your size, maybe you can give it to your partner, trade for a new car or something. Okay. All right. I'm also going to give away an incredible Hendricus fertilizer, and they've been on our show now for a while. And these guys make a great product. It's really safe, really works good. They mix it by hand, it's just incredible. So I like this stuff. It's my favorite, so I'm really happy to work with such a great company. That makes me really happy. So I'm going to give that away too, and I get to give away a couple of Lobelia tupas. So maybe I'll start with that in a minute, but before I do, I'm going to tell you a quick story. Now, a couple of you may have heard it before, but not many of you. So, I'll just try and get close enough so you can hear me all right. So people are always asking me, why do you say oh la la? And everywhere I go, they say, well, where did this oh la la come from? And so I'm a traveler. I love to travel. I've led 10 international garden tours around the world. I've been everywhere leading garden tours. But when I'm not leading a garden tour with my wife, Mary, we go on exercise trips. So one time we hiked, just the two of us, 360 miles across the French Alps. We've done bicycle rides in New Zealand and hikes up mountains in South America. We love that stuff. But this story comes from a bike ride in France. So basically, we were on a 1,000-mile bike ride in France. We had our tents on our bikes. It's so fun to do, you know, and the campgrounds cost practically nothing, you know, and the French people love to talk to you when you're on a bike, so it's really, and the campgrounds are 1K from all the towns. So if you ever want to have a cheap trip to France, the campgrounds are just great, you know, and they're 1K from town. You just set your tent up in the middle of a big field. None of the stuff like we have here with privacy or anything like that. But they got hot showers. They're 1K from town, and they cost like $8 for a night. So anyway, we're on this bike ride. We're down there in Provence somewhere riding along. And this was a few years ago. And we saw what you may recognize if you go to France, because now they're common, but they were brand new then. We'd never seen them. Outdoor bathrooms. So they're like this giant plastic igloo, you know. And so we recognized what it was, even though we'd never seen one before. And we pull over, and I'm watching the bike on the bench, and she puts in 2 francs to go into the bathroom. And she goes in there. A minute or so later, she opens the door. She's coming out. She goes, "You're not going to believe it in there." And I go, "What? What?" She goes, "It's spotlessly clean, and it plays great music." All right, you know. So I get up to go in, and she's holding the door. And she goes, "Hey, why should we waste 2 francs? You know, the door's open. Go use it." I go, "Yeah, why waste 2 francs?" So I go in, shut the door, walk to the front. There's one little thing we didn't know about French toilets. They're self-cleaning. When the door shuts, it means the person left. It's time to clean. I walk to the front. Whoosh! I go whoosh from behind. I go in the door. It's locked. Whoosh from the side. The whole time, my wife Mary's sitting on the park bench watching this toilet going. Finally, the door opens, the jets stop, I'm staggering out, French, from head to foot. And here's this little French guy wearing a beret, holding a baguette, looks at me and goes, "Oh la la." After that came, I was clean though, I'll tell you that much. Okay. Let's start by talking about a plant that isn't going to look like anything here. It's called Lobelia tupa. Comes from Chile, and but it's totally hardy in our area, and it gets flowers, just these unbelievably spectacular flowers on a plant about this tall. And what I found they do that's really interesting, now this likes sun, and likes good perennial garden soil. It just loves that. And it's been interesting because in those coldest winters, I went out and they were dead. And I went, wow, I lost them. They came up about 3 feet away. And why they did that, I don't know. And they've been slowly but surely moving to a spot in my garden they like better. So I get to give 2 of these away. So I think I'll start with that.
Those are grown by seed from the kids here in the nursery.
So grown by seed by the kids here in the nursery. How cool is that, you know? And so it's a species, so if you get some seeds, you could grow it too, you know? Let me tell you, hummingbirds are so crazy for this stuff. So not only is it one of the most, it has almost a bluish green foliage that looks really cool when it gets big. And the hummingbirds just are crazy for this plant, just crazy. Now, you know, it's funny. First time I grew it, and it might be true of this, it bloomed really late in summer. But every year now it blooms earlier for me, and I'm not sure why. So a lot of times by July I'm in full bloom. So, which I like, because I like everything to get moving, you know. Okay, so some lucky person's going to win this. Who has a wiener dog? No, nobody owns a wiener dog around here? That's probably lucky. They're the most vicious dogs I've ever met. My dog Fred ran into a nest of them near the park. It was terrible. Who's got a gray cat? Okay, I saw her first.
We do.
All right, now you got to answer my tough Ciscoe Garden Stumper question to win this. Okay, hummingbirds can flap their wings when they're standing in the air. They flap their wings 80 times per second. But at one thing they do, they can actually flap their wings 160 times per second. Do they do that when they're mad or when they're in love? She got it! When they're in love, yes. All right. Congratulations. Enjoy that plant. Okay. So maybe I'll give another away as time goes on. I think I'll go back and forth. At some point we'll do Q&A too, but I think I'll go back and forth between like shrubs and perennials. We'll just kind of vary it around. So this little Hinoki cypress right here is a dwarf. Although I'll tell you, it can get to 12 feet tall over many, many, many years. And I'm not sure, they may even reach 15, but by then you'll be like 320 years old, so it won't really matter. But this Hinoki cypress is called Verdonii, and it's the only yellow gold one that doesn't burn in the sun. So if you plant this in the shade, it's just a green Hinoki. It's beautiful either way. But if you plant this little guy out in the full sun, it'll never burn, and it'll get the most beautiful orange gold color you've ever seen in your life. This is one of my all-time favorite plants. You know about my little problem, right? See, anybody know what my very first TV show was? It was called Northwest Home and Garden. And the host of that show, Jeff Probst from Survivor. Jeff Probst. And Jeff lived in Washington. He lived near Seattle, and he worked at Boeing. His dad got him that job. And his dad said, there's no way you're quitting this great job at Boeing to do this hokey garden show. Look what I did for his career. But one of the problems with that show was that I had a pretty cool garden. So whenever they wanted to do a special on a garden, one part of a garden, they always would end up coming to my house to do it. And the very first time they did it was my rock garden. So they came over and I started talking about the cool plants in my rock garden, going on. And I got to about the fourth plant, and my producer went, "Stop! Right now! Stop!" And I go, "What? What's the matter?" She goes, "You cannot say one more plant is your favorite." No! So, I do have a little problem here, but I'll try my best not to say that any of the plants are my favorite, but this really is my favorite. So, this is a grevillea. Grevilleas come from Australia. Now, this one is a real close relative of Grevillea victoriae, which I grow at my house. Gets 6 feet tall and wide, blooms all winter long. The Anna's hummingbird is the big green hummingbird that stays here all winter long. If you're like me and you travel in the winter, then you don't want to hang up bird feeders, because if the birds got dependent on you in winter for that hummingbird feeder and you went away, a hummingbird can starve to death in 1 hour in winter. So you have to be careful. You know, if you're going to feed them, you got to make sure somebody's covering your bases if you leave. So I don't feed them, except for I plant all kinds of things that bloom all winter long, and so my hummingbirds have food all the time. These plants, now this one's called Marshall Ulbrich, and I don't know this one as well, but I think it's a really close relative. Here's the odd thing. I led a garden tour down in Melbourne, and another time I went down and hiked in Melbourne, Australia, and And I saw these plants all over, and they have these beautiful red flowers all over them. I come back to Washington, I walk into a little nursery down in Tacoma called Jungle Fever, and I see this this grevillea. And I, you know, basically I said, you shouldn't even sell that because it only blooms in wintertime here, and it's going to die out there because it's 100 degrees in Melbourne most of the time, you know, and it doesn't get cold. And the person at nursery basically said, no, it's hardy. I mean, I don't believe it. Well, that was 20 years ago he gave me one. It's been in my garden ever since. So if you want to attract hummingbirds, now 6 feet tall, 6 feet wide, but magnificent, magnificent plant. Now I can't quite vouch for this one, but as far as I know, this is as hardy as Grevillea victoriae, which is the one that I've got at my house. So really a great plant. Lord, I love it. Oh, there, you know what? Village Green Perennials, Vera here, she has some of the best plants that I can't find anywhere I go. So you're so lucky to have her nursery around here, you know.
That's what we have in common.
I love, when I walk into a nursery and I find these kind of plants, I get so excited, you know. So this is called Aramurus, but easier to remember, foxtail lily. And there's a whole bunch of different kinds of these foxtail lilies. So what they do is they come up with this kind of interesting, here, I'll pass it around, you can get a look at this. So what you get is, you get this really interesting, when you buy it, if you bought them as a bulb, they kind of look like some kind of outer space Sputnik or something, you know. And then they send up this cool foliage that gets ugly when they bloom, so you kind of hide it behind other plants. But then it sends up these really tall. There's one called Napolensis. I can't even touch as high as flower goes. And they have these soft yellow, spectacular orange, pink flowers, you know, just magnificent blooms. Now, interesting thing, they say you shouldn't water them too much. They need good drainage. And if you put them in clay soil, you probably lose them if you water them. But the thing is, in my just good perennial garden soil, I grow them next to delphiniums. Because the delphiniums come up with a sparkling dark blue flowers, and then I've got orange Aramurus or foxtail lily next to them. The combination makes grown men burst into tears. I actually saw a squirrel crying that was so the thing is, you have to water delphinium to keep them going or they poop out on you. I water those delphiniums, that gets hit a lot. I've never lost a one at my house. And if you ever go to Spokane, and if you're there in June, because that's usually when these bloom, see if you can find some people that are in the garden club there and ask them to take you to the Foxtail fields. Because what happened, a woman was married to the guy building the railroad through Spokane, and every time she took the train to come meet her husband wherever he was, she'd go through Spokane. Every time she did, she threw seeds of foxtail out the window of the train in the same field. And now there's acres of foxtail lily that are just the most incredible sight you'll ever see in your life. So that's a great plant, to say the least. All right, let's see what I wanted. Okay, all right, we're going to do a contest, a question here, and we'll give away a t-shirt here. So, this, I hope you can all see it okay. So this is flowering currant. And you know, the flowering currant's native to Washington, west side of the mountains. I think they go over a little to the east side too. So they're hardy to 10 below zero, I think. So these flowering currants bloom about right now, you know. So okay, I'm going to ask a question in a minute, and we'll talk more about this. So first, the question: who drives a Mini Cooper? Okay, I got one. All right, you can tell she's a wild woman. Okay, all right, to win one of these wonderful t-shirts for right here. Okay, you ready? All right. What hummingbird does this attract the most? Well, I'm saying this really horrible. If you plant this will you be more likely to attract the Annis hummingbird to your garden or the Rufus hummingbird? You're probably going to attract them equal. This is a really dumb question. Rufus, you got it! All right, here. All right, get ready. Hey. Yeah, but here's the thing. Rufus hummingbirds are the one that they migrate. They go back to Mexico. They fly 2,000 miles. They can fly 500 miles in one day. They don't, without stopping. So, and Rufus hummingbirds are really tough hummingbirds, let me tell you. I'll tell you a story in a bit. So, the thing is, they come back. Now, the way these Rufus hummingbirds work is the males come first. So a whole bunch of them take off together from Mexico. A friend of mine down in southern Oregon was doing the dishes, and she saw 50 male Rufus hummingbirds fly by her kitchen window together. So they get to where they're going to go and they disperse. What are they looking for? They're looking for food. And where they find food, they make their territory. And guess what blooms right when they come here? The flowering currant. If you got a bunch of those in your garden, you're going to get Rufus hummingbirds. Now, the males looking for lots of food, they make that their territory. The female is coming up. She's not that attracted to the male hummingbird because they're real bums. But the thing is, they don't do anything. The male Rufus all hummingbirds are this way. The female makes the nest, sits on the eggs, feeds the young, does everything. The male has two jobs: protect its territory and mate. That's my kind of job. So anyway, so the female is looking for the male though. The reason is she knows if the male made an area its territory, there's plenty of food to raise her young. So that's why she's going to come, and now you're going to have Rufus hummingbirds in your garden. So now there's something I got to tell you about these. I've seen these murdered by so many good gardeners. The reason, they water them. These things are native plants to Washington. They don't want you watering them all the time. Until they establish roots, you got to water any plant. But once, if you plant it where it gets a little morning sun or bright woodsy shade, and you plant that and you never water it once it's established and doing well, it'll live for years for you. But the minute we start watering this like we do other plants to try to help it, we rot the roots and kill it. So these are, if you want Rufus hummingbirds, this is your baby right there. By the way, a lot of people ask me, what about the white ones? Because there's icicle, you know, this is probably King Edward VII or something like that. But there's one called icicles, I think, maybe something else, but it's white icicles. And that one, I planted that in my garden. It takes a while. It's not going to attract the male when they're flying by, but once they make your garden their territory, they find everything that's edible in there, and you'll have them hitting anything that's edible, and they love the white icicles. So it's a great plant. Okay, all right, I want to talk about these for a second, and we'll give away my book next, okay? All right, so these Heucheras, do you remember when you couldn't get anything like this? It wasn't that many years ago. The Heuchera, or the coral bells that my mom grew and almost all of our moms grew when I was a kid, it was called Heuchera sanguineum, had green leaves and red flowers, and the hummingbirds die for them, you know. So, when these first came out, it was Palace Purple was the very first one that I remember. And I was so excited, I could barely stand it, you know. So cool. Because, you want foliage color. Flowers are here today, gone tomorrow, with flowering shrubs, perennials, all those things. It's always in flux. That's why it's so fun to garden with them, because you got to be so creative. But the thing is, if all you got is green plants in your garden, it's going to be pretty boring if something's not blooming all the time, and they're going to have some periods when they're not. So colored foliage is what really carries the garden through, Now, something happened after I bought a whole bunch of these and put them around in the garden, and new ones came out, and now they're coming out with new ones like every day, it feels like, you know. I don't even know which one this is. Berry smoothie. So, pretty good. I wish they'd name one of these after me. That'd be fun. But anyway, so I planted a bunch of these guys. Should we pass it around? Okay, great. All right. So I planted a lot of colored foliage heucheras, and they're U.S. wildflowers, by the way. They're just hybrids of different ones. So then, by the next year, they still look pretty good. By the third year, they started getting these bare stalks that were sticking up like little palm trees with only leaves on the top. And they didn't look good at all. And I didn't know what to do, you know. And I thought, well, do I throw that away? It looks terrible, you know. So I did what I always do. You might as well do an experiment and find out what's going to happen. So in March, I went out there about early to mid-March, and I cut every one that looked horrible, which was just about all of them, to 1/8 inch from the ground. The whole thing. Now, Megan and I did it on TV, but I already knew it worked, but she didn't. So she came over to my house. This is the first time she gave me a really bad time. The camera's on, and I go, yeah, we're going to cut these down to 1/8 inch from the ground, then put a little alfalfa meal or a good fertilizer around them, you know, and then keep them moist. And I said, I think they'll come right back. So they turned off the camera for a minute, and Megan and I, we improvise everything. I don't even know what we're going to do when I get to her house. She doesn't know what we're going to do when we get to my house. We don't even talk about it. The camera goes on, we start. So it's more fun that way, you know. So anyway, so after I cut them down, they turned off the camera. She turned to me, she goes, are you sure you know what you're talking about? Even worse, she came back 3 weeks later, because we trade off shooting at her house and my house most of the time. She came back 3 weeks later to shoot again. She goes over and looks at the heuchera. It was like twice the size of the one I'm handing out. She turns to me and goes, you bought a new one. So believe me, it really works. Okay, now for my book, I have a question I'm going to ask. Okay, who has a Volkswagen Bug? Okay, right there. All right. Okay, all right. To win this book, which I'll sign for you. Okay. Now if I can only remember what the question was. Oh yeah! Do these heucheras with fancy leaves attract hummingbirds like the old red-flowered Heuchera sanguineum did? You only get 2 tries. Say yes? You got it! Yes! I'll get to you at the end if you want to need to leave grabbing. So, I didn't know if they did or not. And people were asking me. You know, a lot of books say hummingbirds won't come within 2 feet of the ground. That's a bunch of hooey. Believe me, I see them come to the ground all the time. So, people were asking me, I didn't know. Well, when company comes, a lot of times I make flower arrangements. Mary and I, we kind of even compete sometimes when we make flower arrangements. So, I had 2 couples coming over, and we were going to be sitting on the patio on our 44-inch table, and so I thought I'll make a little flower arrangement, put it in the middle of the table. So I didn't make too big a one, but I had some bold things in there, so for contrast, I put in some sprays of flowers from some of the heucheras. While we were eating dinner, 6 people around 44-inch table, the hummingbirds were coming to the flowers of the heuchera right between us. The only problem was I was wearing a red sweater, and one of the hummingbirds kept trying to stick its beak in my ear, which was so frustrating. So, okay. All right, let me think what I want to talk. Okay. Well, these are fantastic. Now, these have a lot of different names. They're erythroniums, but they're native to Washington, and a lot of times people call them dog-tooth lily or trout lilies, either way. And they're up in the high mountains, and it's nice and moist in the areas they are, And then when it dries out, they don't get hardly any rain all summer. You know, with almost every bulb you grow, that's exactly what you want. You want them moist while they're growing, whether they're tulips, fritillarias. There's a few exceptions like camas lilies and some. But most of them, most lilies of any kind, or this isn't a lily, but I mean most bulbs, sorry, not lilies. But most bulbs of any kind want water in the spring and no water for the rest of the summer. So if your tulips die out all the time, it could be partially because of that. Even daffodils really don't want to be watered. Now that can be really difficult to do. I've got them all between all my other plants, and sometimes you gotta water. So you try and find tough ones. Well, erythronium is tough. This stuff comes back no matter what you do to it. You can run this over with a semi-truck. Oh God, that felt good. So, and this is a really rare one, and Vera said I can have one, so I'm going to take this one. But these get way bigger leaves and bigger flowers than a lot of the other kinds. So this one's called pagoda. There's a lot of good ones, though, let me tell you. Revolutum. There's some with the darkest foliage you've ever seen, with spots all over them, and pink, little pink flowers that you just die for, and white ones. And so keep an eye out. You'll end up with a collection of these before you know it hits you. I'll pass one around, though.
There's a big clump of those growing back in the
Oh,
woods.
that's right. Back there's a big, big clump of them, so you can go look at them in real life here. So here, I'll pass this around. You're kind of our van up here. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to make sure everything keeps going. Now, I wanted to show you a couple of trilliums here. So, okay, this is our native trillium to Western Washington, Trillium ovatum. And I just think they're the coolest plant there ever was. And I remember planting the very first one in my garden 30 years ago. Now they're all over the garden. They're almost a ground cover in some areas of my garden. So they're wonderful, and if you just leave them undisturbed, they tend to seed themselves over time. You can divide them. I had to divide one in full bloom once. It's for the master gardeners, and I was chairman of the native plant, part of the plant sale. And a woman called me up and said, I've got like a 3-foot wide Trillium ovatum, and I want to give it to your plant sale. And I went and dug it up, and then I thought, oh my God, I'm going to make a lot of money for the master gardeners with this. So in full bloom, I turned it into about 24 things. And when I sold them, I warned everyone, I have no idea if these are going to survive. So, and I still charged them in for them. And people just figured, well, you know, I said, I think they're going to live, but I can't guarantee it. Well, the one that I divided, I brought one home. It's like humongous now. So these are great, great, beautiful plants, and they're just so wonderful for a nice shady spot in your garden. And I don't think people use them enough. But you should see some of the new ones now. Okay, so let me see here. Okay, so this one, I gotta just make sure which is which. Okay, this is, I always have trouble saying this, Kurbayashi or Kurbayashi. Kurbayashi. So this trillium gets way, way bigger leaves than this. They're gonna be like 4 times bigger than this. So the leaves get really big. They have beautiful spotting, mottling all over them. And then, I don't know which color this is.
Red.
This, oh yeah, that's my favorite. Cleary red flower that big. Oh, these are to die for, and they're tough as nails. You can't get them anywhere. So I wish so bad you could see the flower on this, but you can't, because she's got some up there in her kind of woodsy area up there. And there's another one called Chloropedilum, and I think that's this. Oh, this is Cecile. This is a great one too. You never know what you're going to get with these. Some are just so spotted you can't believe the leaves. I have one that leaves are almost black. And then they get really, now this is a youngster, This will get way bigger, the leaves will get bigger, and they'll get about a foot and a half tall. So this is Ciscoe. This is a really great one.
That's chloropetalum.
Oh, that's chloropetalum. Okay, so that's going to have leaves like this, and that one has white flowers. They'll be way bigger as it gets older.
How
So
big leaves?
the leaves get, on mine at home, they're like this.
There's
Now,
some clumps of those growing down here. Too.
good, you'll be able to see them. And you know, there's a lot of variation. If you take a cutting of a plant, you get the exact same plant. No variation at all. But if something comes up from seed, you may get one with totally different colored leaves, different flowers. You never know what you're going to get. You may have smaller leaves, bigger leaves. That's why a lot of times when you used to go like the Heronswood Nursery and you bought Heronswood Blue Corydalus or something, it's because one of the seedlings came up with way different characteristics that they knew were going to make them very rich. So, okay. All right. Okay, let me think what I
Are
want
they
to...
hard to grow on bulb?
Huh?
Are they easy to grow on bulb with bulbs?
If you buy bulbs, I've never bought a trillium from a bulb. But somebody gave me seed and they grew from that, but it takes a while before they bloom. So, I think it's hard to buy trillium bulbs because they're not like little bulbs. They're all stuck together in really weird ways. I learned that when I divided them. So it's rare that you see trillium bulbs for sale. Can happen, but it's rare. So you might be better off just buying one already started. And it'll take longer anyway if... okay, let me think which direction I want to go. I like this quite a bit. Let me think. Which direction do I want to go? Sorry, a little delay in the action here as I look around at my choices. Well, this is a big hummingbird plant right here. And this is a barberry. So if you want to make sure kids don't run through your garden, man, you don't want to put these where your dog runs because they can get poked in the eye, So you got to be careful. But this one's not too fragrant, but how do you beat that color? Now, this is called Darwin barberry or Darwinii, and these come from Chile. And my wife and I were hiking in the Andes Mountains, and we went through one of the only remaining monkey tree forests left on Earth. Those monkey trees come from down in Chile. And you know how sharp the needles are on a monkey tree? This was the undercover. And I was in shorts, and I'll tell you what, I did not sit down to eat lunch. And this is the kind of plant, if you put in your garden and you're like me and you back up on your hands and knees when you're weeding, you run into this, it'll be a very uplifting experience. All right. Hey, by the way, one of the big problems we have in Washington State right now, or all over the country, and I think really the world, are the honeybees are dying out. We got mysterious honeybee decline. Now I've read that there's a predator that's getting into our honeybees now. Also, I just read recently now that they know overuse of pesticides is a big cause of it. So one of the things, if you plant a ceanothus, now this has to have good drainage and full sun. Otherwise, they won't make it. California natives, ceanothus. But the thing is, this one's called Dark Star, so it has... Oh, no, this is Victoria.
Dark Star's the other one.
I actually like this the best. I tell you, even though it doesn't have this dark blue flowers as Dark Star, and this gets quite big. Gotta tell you, 12 feet by 12 feet over many years. But they're magnificent. Can you imagine that covered with these blooms? Every bee in the whole West Coast is on my ceanothus in my garden every year. My gosh, people, it's so funny to watch because you can see the people that are naturalists, they walk by and they show the kid because the whole thing just buzzes. It's just And other people, they take their kid across the road, walk to the other side. So you can really tell if someone's a naturalist or a little afraid of nature, you know. So, okay. Oh, here's a really, really cool plant, and I can pass this around. We'll give away another t-shirt here. Okay, I'll ask a question. I'll give away another t-shirt first. All right. Okay, let me think what question I want to ask. Okay, who has got a Maine Coon cat? Anybody got one? They're bigger. They are bigger than St. Bernards. And I never exaggerate. Okay, has anybody got a black lab? All right, right there. She was first. Okay, now to win a T-shirt. Okay, can hummingbirds? Hummingbirds can do two things humans can do better than humans, but there's one thing humans do that hummingbirds can't do. Is it that hummingbirds can't see very well, they can't smell very well, and I don't mean they don't take showers, or do they not hear very well? What do you guess? You got it. Good job. Yes, hummingbirds can't smell at all. They don't care how fragrant your plants are in a million years. They have no sense of odor at all. They can see better than people. They can hear better than people. And for another T-shirt, okay, who has a mom over 90 years old? Okay, right there. All right, my mom is 95.
So it's fine.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And I go back to Wisconsin. The first thing, I should say Wisconsin, name it right. The first thing she does, get out the Scrabble board and clean my clock, and then bragged to all her old buddies the whole time I'm home about it. Next thing, we're out in the garden, weeding like crazy. She could barely walk, but she could get on her hands and knees and still outweed me. And she's such a Packer fan, it's unbelievable. Last year, I was listening to NPR, and I heard that in my hometown of Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, they had tornadoes, and really bad ones. So I called my mom, and Mom, are you all right? You know, how was that storm? She said, that was the worst storm I've ever been through. I said, really? It was that bad? She said, yes. The TV kept turning off in the middle of the Packer game. Okay, so, all right, here's your question. Can hummingbirds walk?
No. Yes.
Well, they do have feet.
They do have
You can
feet.
see them.
Yeah. But can they walk? You only get 2 tries on
think
this.
so.
This is did you say no?
I said no.
Yeah. Hummingbirds cannot walk. If you want hummingbirds in your garden, the best thing you can do is marry a Canadian. The reason for that is because they insist on drying all your clothes on a clothesline year-round. And hummingbirds love clotheslines. It's just the perfect size for them to perch on, and they chase each other around all day long. But they can only move about an inch walking, that's it. So, and let me tell you, Canadians, if they're all like my wife Mary, you even dry your clothes in the middle of winter, the sheets, everything. You have not lived till you sleep on a frozen stiff sheet. Oh, la, la. Okay, yeah, I want to show you I'll show this, because I love this. Oh, there's so many cool ones to show you. But I do want to do Q&A too a little. So, this is Dicentra, we call them bleeding heart. And this is spectabilis, which means spectacular in Latin, and they come from China. But this is a hybrid. This was discovered in Hadspin's garden in England, and I was there about right after they discovered this plant. So that was kind of cool. And I was one of the very first people to get one. So this foliage, she's got some great ones back there. This foliage just gets more and more gold. If you give it, it'll take shade really well, but if you put it in sun, it stays way more golden. This is such a great plant. It's unbelievable, and hummingbirds can't leave it alone. It has one pest, because slugs, snails, never touch it. Never. Deer will eat it, but after they eat it, they get a really bad tummy ache, and they won't do it again. Unfortunately, next year another new deer comes. It's got one pest, though, that totally wipes it out. Dogs chasing squirrels really wipe these out. So you might want to figure out a way to protect it a little bit. But here, I'll pass this around. Here, I'll start over here this time. So that's Dicentra goldheart. Dicentra just means bleeding heart. There's new bleeding hearts coming out like crazy right now. There's one called burning hearts, and it has dark, dark blue foliage and the darkest red flowers you've ever seen. But a lot of people it didn't come back for. Did for me, because I had it in super good drainage. So that's the trick to that plant. You got to have super great drainage. All right. This is such a rare plant. I already knocked a leaf. It's very delicate. But this is named after the 3rd president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson. So it's called Jeffersonia diphylla. And diphylla means double leaf, basically. It's just got little white flowers that you don't even see because they're hid under the foliage. I grow it totally for the foliage. You just put it in a protected spot in a shady garden, and it just comes back and the clump gets bigger and bigger every year. And I just think it's the cutest thing since mice. There you go. Okay, hey, let's give away some Hendrikus fertilizer. So, and I'll tell you, I would hardly ever use synthetic fertilizer anymore. I just don't like it. And you know what else I love about this? If you got a puppy or anything, my puppy ate something. We don't know what it was. She's okay, but we went through a week of hell, you know, and even now she's not totally out of the woods, but almost. So we don't know what it was. It could have been chocolate in the road. It could have been anything. But it's so much better to use a product you know is safe. You know, now you don't want to leave this out where the pup's going to eat the whole thing. It's not going to be good, but it's certainly not going to be as harmful as if it were a synthetic fertilizer or something like that. The other thing is, when you use organic fertilizer, you're fertilizing the soil, not the plant. That makes a huge difference. When you use synthetic fertilizer and you put it on the ground, it's made out of petroleum and other products, and it's instantly available to the plant. So if you accidentally put too much and conditions aren't right for growth or something, it's real salty. You get a salt buildup in the soil. It's like when you take the salt shaker and put it on the slug. It can pull the moisture right out of the roots of your plant, and so it's basically can be harmful to plants sometimes. The other thing is, you're just giving the plant one quick shot of nutrition, and then it doesn't have anything again. When you fertilize with an organic fertilizer, you're actually feeding all these little microorganisms in the soil because the plant can't use this. It doesn't even know it's in the ground until the little critters in the soil eat it up. When they eat it up and it goes through them, now it's available to the plant. So that's a slow process, which is what we want. Just like in nature, a leaf falls on the ground, slug eats that, and then breaks it up, and then it gets into the soil and the critters eat it. It's the natural process. So it happens slowly. The other thing I love about organic fertilizer is that if conditions aren't right for growth, the little critters in the soil go dormant. They don't eat it. So they don't make it useful to the plant if conditions aren't right, which is good because we don't want the plants putting out tons of new growth and everything when conditions aren't good. And then when conditions are right, we got moisture, we got a little warmth and everything, they start eating this up, making it available to the plant. So you can't burn or harm your plant. In fact, you just do great things for it. So somebody's going to win this. Okay, who has got a Chihuahua? Okay, all right. Great. Okay. Which is
Henry.
Huh?
His name is Henry.
Henry? Oh, cool name. Mine is Ruby and Fred. Okay. Now, to win this, which is the most feisty hummingbird? The rufous or the anise?
Anna.
One more try. Great comeback! You bet. Okay. We can hand that back, baby. You can hand it around if you want. Okay, so, yes, rufous hummingbirds are 10 times more feisty than are the anise. And here's one thing you should remember. Never hang 2 hummingbird feeders where the hummingbirds can see them both. You get a rufous hummingbird on there that doesn't want anybody in their territory, back and forth, back and forth. They'll use half his energy just trying to kick the living tweedle out of all his buddies, you know. So it's much better to put them where they can't see each other. And it works better anyway. And hummingbirds like moving water way better than they like still water. You'll notice they hardly ever go to a bird bath. It's rare to see. Sometimes I'll be out watering my pots and I'll be standing there maybe watering something over here. They start going through. It's so fun. And I have an old man statue made by 2 artist buddies of mine named Little and Lewis from Bainbridge Island. And it's this old man's face. It's so cool. It's unbelievable. And it spits water down into a basin about 3.5 feet below. The hummingbirds come, both rufous and anise do it. But the hummingbirds come and they drink the water as it comes out of his mouth and ride it down to the basin. They come back up. And the other day I was with a friend in the garden and we were back on this narrow trail in my garden laughing at the rufous hummingbirds that happened to be doing it right then. And then we walked out of the little trail. One of the hummingbirds hit me in the ear, sat in front of me going, beep, 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 beep. I'm like, all right, I'm sorry, you know. So watch out for those rufous hummingbirds. Okay. Now, this is a wonderful, wonderful plant you don't see. And I think we'll do Q&A unless I see something else I just have to tell you about here. But, maybe one more. So, this plant comes from Australia. And I was at a master gardener plant sale years and years ago, because I've been into master gardeners for a long time, as some of us have. And and somebody came up and showed me this plant and said, "Do you know what it is?" And I said, "I've seen that in Australia. I know I have, but I don't know what it is." I just couldn't remember. Well, it's called Prostanthera. This is Prostanthera cunatum, which is a harder one to find than there's, I can't remember, but there's one with purple flowers. This has white flowers. I think this is by far the cooler one. So they gave it to me, since nobody could identify that thing. They gave it to me, and that made it a lot easier to identify it instead of trying to remember what did that look like. And I planted it, and that was, I'll bet you that was 25 years ago. Now, it finally died in that really cold winter last year, but it had been going downhill for about 3 years, all those cold winters, I think. But I had it for 22 years. So, and when it comes by, smell that foliage. They call it Australian mint. It's fantastic. How come I can't smell it? I don't smell it. I don't know why. Oh, this is a hebe. Where is that thing? Oh, la la. Oh, it's right here. Okay. Oh, that's better. Oh, jeez. Okay, well, I might as well tell about the hebe, huh? So this is called quicksilver. How many of you planted hebes and they died or went to heck over the last 3 winters? Those winters were so brutal. It's the worst 3 winters in a row I remember. I've lived here since '72, and I lost so many plants in my garden. So my wife had this in her garden, and I had it. And it looked so horrible after the winter. I just went, you know, and this plant's from New Zealand, by the way. So at the end of winter, mine looked so bad, I ripped it out. She cut hers to about 1 inch from the ground. Hers is the most magnificent, beautiful plant right now. See, you know about my wife, Mary, and I, right? We divide the garden down the middle. She gets this side, I get this side. Whenever someone comes over, I always go, which side do you like the best? And I know they're she's bribing all those people that keep voting for her side. So don't give up on your Hebes. A lot of times they'll come back, and when they do, they look fantastic like this, but hers has gotten way bigger, you know. So these Hebe Quicksilver, the smaller the leaf on your Hebe, the better chance it has of making it through the winter. Some were throwaways, there was no doubt about it. You know, these phormiums, these are the most fantastic plants for centerpieces in your container. You imagine all the color combos you could do with some purples and different things with this. And but you know, it used to be $50 for this right here. But thanks to those last 3 winters, everybody thinks they're annuals now, you know. But so last year they were so cheap. When I went to the nursery, I bought a bunch, planted them around because I love that spiky foliage. They give you a contrast, all that color and everything. And lo and behold, they didn't even get harmed by the winter. Not one bit. So now we may go 20 years without another thing like this, you know. I'm a little optimistic here. But hey, and one thing I tell you, if you're going to put these in the garden, what I do is about once a week I go out, and if there's any leaves that don't look good, I cut them off. If you do that, you'll keep it looking perfect, because you don't want all the dead stuff in there. Then they don't really look their best like they should. But they're so much cheaper now, and they are just fantastic plants. If you want, you can cut them down if they get really harmed by the winter. They almost always come back. The problem is, it takes all summer before they even get near this tall, and then they get hammered by the next year, and it's like, after a while you go, it's not worth it. But hey, for a centerpiece, that's worth it, even if it's an annual, if you ask me. I love these things with a passion. And that's New Zealand as well. Oh, okay, for another t-shirt. Okay, who has a orange cat? Okay, I saw her first. All right, now, let's see how good a catch you are. But do these attract hummingbirds? One more try. Yes! But you're kind of right, because they rarely bloom in our area. But if they do, it's funny, at Seattle University, I ran the grounds department for 24 years at Seattle University. And one year, one of the gardeners came running in. Oh yeah, you got it, good. One of the gardeners came running in, she said, all over campus, all the phormium or New Zealand flax, because the native people in New Zealand made their clothes out of this for years. And they actually, in the 1800s, had selected about 35 different kinds of phormiums for their ability to make colorful, strong clothes. So it's kind of interesting. They really knew how to use this stuff. But so my gardener came running in. She said, every phormium on campus is in bloom. I said, oh, go out and cut the flowers off. She goes, why? I just got back from leading a garden tour to New Zealand, and everywhere in New Zealand you see dead flowers on these, and I got so tired of them, you know. So she went out, you know, to maybe cut a few off. She came back and said, you do not want me to cut those flowers off. I went, why not? She said, because there's like 12 hummingbirds on every one of those stalks. Wow. They attract hummingbirds like crazy until they dry up and then cut them off. Okay, who won this? All right. I hope there's not a mud puddle back there.